Everyone, welcome to the Doctors Running podcast, where we, a group of doctors of physical therapy, talk about the art and the science of the things that we're put on our feet. Today, I am joined by Dr. Salas, and we are going to talk about a really cool concept that, surprisingly, in 200 plus episodes, we haven't talked about. We're going to talk about the art and the science of the long run. And it's great because Dr. Salas actually just did one, and he does a lot more than I do right now. So we'll be bouncing back and forth. The other big things I got to note, if you might notice that my setup looks a little different, I am coming to you currently from Sherwood, Oregon, in a closet because I have no furniture and haven't set anything up yet. So I've been rushing around trying to figure out where I'm going to do this recording. So please, for those of you on YouTube, enjoy the view. It may stay the same, might change. I'm sitting on the floor right now. But so David, how are you doing?
I'm doing great, buddy. Oh my God. Yeah. I mean, I just got to give massive props to you for being in the middle of a freaking move and still coming on and recording with me.
Heck
so
yeah.
cheers to that. That's awesome.
We're going to have a good episode. This is going to be a classic.
When he said I was fresh off the long run, I am fresh off the long run. I just ate. I'm still drinking my coffee. Yep. And so if you see me sip it from time to time throughout the recording, that is why.
Dude, I need some more coffee. But so let's jump right. Yeah. So for those who don't know, I'm in the middle of a move right now. So moving up from Southern California, starting a job, and I guess I can announce it, officially starting at George Fox University in their DPT, the Doctor of Physical Therapy program, which I'm super excited to do. Just got all that stuff done. Have a badge now that works and beeped into the department. I was super excited. So running all over here. Still got to finish up a couple weeks down in Southern California for the school I teach at or taught at previously. But yeah, super excited and appreciate David doing a recording at mid lunch essentially because normally record in the evening, but I'll be flying out. So we'll just jump right into this. So let David. Topic of today is all about the long run. So what I want to ask you, and I'll let you lead this off, is in a runner's training and an arsenal of different workouts and types of runs, what is the point or the purpose of a long run?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of different things you can attribute the purpose to. I think one of the large ones is the building the capacity to do more with your body. And most of the people that everyone, if you run competitively in the competitive sphere, pretty much everyone does one. And that's for different reasons. But if I'm speaking more about the just general population, usually it's to increase mileage so that they can run a half marathon, so that they can run a marathon. It's usually in terms of building tolerance for volume and what they are wanting to do. For others, maybe the long run itself, they can do the mileage any day of the week. It's not necessarily that they're trying to run farther. They might be working more to improve aerobic capacity, capillary beds, mitochondrial density, get some of the aerobic adaptations so that when you get into actually working hard, your body operates a little bit more smoother from a physiologic standpoint. And hopefully you're building up less lactate, you're clearing more of it away, reuptaking some of that energy, and then ultimately turning that towards aerobic performance in a half marathon. You can make a case even in a 10K, 5K, even 1500, a lot of the lactate studies and things like that can show some improvements with anaerobic glycolysis, aerobic and anaerobic, because of the clearance rates on some of that stuff. But that's, I think, getting into the weeds. But I think the larger majority of the population, it's usually to build tissue tolerance, adaptation, and work their way towards doing something longer, because chances are your long run probably isn't going to be a marathon before you run the actual marathon. So I think for the larger sake of this conversation, it's usually building tissue tolerance and physiologic adaptations.
Yeah, I definitely agree. So most of our listeners are going to be doing, a distance unique to them. So if you're someone training for a marathon, you are not necessarily going to run a marathon distance. You generally save that. There's a very small population that does that because the risk benefit, the ratio kind of is really offset as you keep doing more and more and more of those distances. But the distance will vary depending on what distance you're racing. So as you said, if you're running a 1500, that long run might look very different than somebody doing a marathon long run. But the general idea is either getting the physiologic benefit of doing that longer endurance training for any of the reasons that you mentioned, including some musculoskeletal ones of building tissue tolerance, getting used to time on your feet. But then there's the longer distance half marathon group that they're doing it to be trained specifically for their race distance. It's one of the most important quote unquote workouts or runs you can do is the long run, because that prepares you thanks to the rule of specificity. The rule of specificity is doing specifically what you plan to do. So lots of runners, even mid-distance runners, do their long runs. It's going to look different, but the concept behind it is still the same. Either building those very, very good physiological capacities or getting specific to it. So and I mentioned this phrase, but what are the risks and what are the benefits to doing long runs? Because it's not just some perfect thing like, oh, this is one, there's all these wonderful things. So what are the variations between those two things?
Totally. Yeah. So I think we'll start off with some of the risks. I think they're one of the things that a lot of people kind of know of immediately going into this. And I think it's one of the reasons why a lot of people have hesitancy about going far and doing it, because it is a little bit scary, even for people that have been doing it forever. I mean, you could take pretty much any runner off the street. Someone's had an injury at some point in their life. And like, if you have been coming off an injury or you are prone to them, like mileage can be a very sticky subject for a lot of people. And so like, there's this old saying, like, just because you can doesn't mean you should. Like with certain miles, with building mileage and all that. And we'll go into that later, but some of the risk is injury. It is a higher load on your body in the acute phase. And if it's a load that you're not used to doing, I mean, it can be a big load. I mean, like even for someone like you and me, like we run, I mean, right now I'm not running 70-mile weeks. I'm actually coming off an injury, so I just hit my first 60-mile week for the first time in probably 2 months. Literally it's been 2 months since the last time I've hit a 60-mile week. So, and for me, I'm usually somewhere between 70, if I'm getting ready for a marathon, 80. But I'm probably more in the 70 camp. And so I'm not even there right now, And so when you look at the long run across someone that is relatively experienced in putting that, because hardly anyone runs 60 plus miles a week unless they're in that kind of more competitive sphere. But most people are probably running somewhere between 30 and 40. If they're getting ready for a marathon, they're probably not running 7 days a week, and they probably have to be a little bit more selective with their mileage. And if you're being more selective with your mileage, let's say you run, I don't know, if you did a 35-mile week across 4 days of running, that would be give or take a little over 8 miles a day. So they're probably doing, I don't know, so like somewhere between 6 and 9, maybe, on a regular day, with the long run of probably 10 to 12. But even if you look at that, that's still, I don't know. The math doesn't really math there. That's
no, you're doing fine. I'll explain in just a second why I made that face. But yeah,
is that whether or not it's a long run?
No, I'll mention it. I think you're definitely going the conservative route. I don't think a lot of people do. But
yeah, they might actually go 15 or more.
No.
Yeah. That's a whole nother topic. But where I'm going with this is, if you look at the math and the percent of volume that is more per run in just that one long run, you're looking at almost a 30 to 40% swing on your daily runs. Like, this is a large increase in volume. And even for someone like myself, if I just came off a 60-mile week, my run that I just ran was just shy of 15. So you can do the math on that, but that's about 20% of a weekly volume in one run.
And I would say, so what I was going to add is, I think you're on the right track, but I think a lot of people, what they do, and I'm not saying this is wrong, I'm just saying there's an inherent risk to this, is a lot of people, their long run makes up like 50+%. Like, let's say 30 to 40 miles a week is a fairly, and people have variations, less and more, but it is very common for a lot of runners to be running about 30, 40 miles a week. And that may be, some people run every day and they might run 4 or 5 miles. Some people might run like 3 to 4 times a week, and they're doing maybe 6, like you said, 6 to 9 most, and then they've got that long run that, all of a sudden to get themselves at 35, 40 might be 15, might be 20. And then you're looking at it about 50% of your mileage coming from one day. A lot of us that are doing higher mileage, we don't typically do that. Even if, I'm doing about 60 to 70 right now, and not really training anything. And that's only with about a 10-mile long run. So my long run distance, again, I don't have as much time right now. Isabella can't go that long, but that's not a massive portion. So when I walk away from that, I'm like, that's not that big of a deal. Like, I can do a couple 10-mile runs during the week and it really doesn't affect me, versus doing 15, doing 20, even when I get up there, it's still like less than 30% of my daily mileage. That's a big, or my weekly mileage. That's a big chunk, but it's not as big as 50%. And so when people need to realize you do workouts to create a stimulus or your easy runs. And if it's depending on the intensity and the relative intensity for you, it can be the really big stimulus that you really have to recover from. And big stimulus can mean big gains if you can recover from it. It can also mean big risk if it's too much for you. And that's a big thing is I see a lot of people who their weekly mileage, like their long run is 50%. And if you have a lot of experience, you can handle that, you're fine. But from how body tends to recover, your body kind of gets used to what you're doing throughout the week. If you suddenly bump things up, there's inherent risk. If you're used to that, you've got the capacity, awesome. But I'm going to encourage people, one of the risks is if your long run is too long or it's too different than what you do throughout the rest of the week, there can just be the whole thing of like, you need to recover. So if you do a 20-mile long run and you're only running 40 miles a week, you need to make sure that you appropriately recover. If you are, awesome. Get after that workout. If you do a long run Sunday, get after that workout on Tuesday or Wednesday or whatever. But if you're not, you need to think about like, again, the goal is to get to the start line, not be injured so you can't get there. And that's just my soapbox about this. So I think the big risks are injury and like doing too much, honestly.
I will say, I think the goal, just to add a little caveat of that.
I'm not trying to scare you, by the way, but
the goal is to be on the start line and do well.
That's fair. Yeah, that's true. Start line and do
well.
Not
just be at the start line.
That's fair. Yeah, to actually fit. Let me clarify. The goal is to get on the start line and sorry, I keep hitting this. To get on the start line and actually finish the race, not to get on the start line and not be able to finish. Right?
Or you've just dug yourself in such a hole that you're there, but you don't even use any of the benefits you got. Yeah. And I think one of the other risks is overtraining. Like, sure. I think you kind of alluded to that.
That's basically what I should have just said. Yeah.
Getting like caught up in that. And I was listening to another podcast actually, where this exercise physiologist, PhD researcher guy, I don't know, I'm forgetting his name off the top of my head. I want to say it's San Mean, the physiologist that works with Pugachev, but was talking about relative physiologic load and relative workload as different entities. Oh. And looking at life load essentially across of a week span and not just what you see physiologically in the work in terms of, their world cycling, like strictly like cycling. So your mileage, your watts, whatever, your heart rate, all the objective data that you can get, but like not looking like that's separate from your sleep, your nutrition, how much stress you had at work throughout the day, like being able to monitor all of that too. And like, I think one of the risks of having long runs is that it drastically does increase that load. Because depending on what your long run looks like, if you're on the roads, you can kind of shut up and go to sleep a little bit because chances of falling and stuff is probably a little bit lower. But if you're doing it in trails and stuff, like your brain is working overtime.
Oh, yeah.
Hard.
All power to the trail runners that do those like 4, 5, 6, 7 hour, 8 hour long runs on trail. And I'm like, oh my goodness, your brain's got to be on. I would eat the dirt fairly quickly. But
so like, miles aren't apples to apples when it comes to long runs either. And like sometimes you can see people, you could line up 5 people and have them go run 15 miles and one might come back feeling great and had a runner's high, whatever, and they're feeling amazing. Another one can be just mentally gassed from the week and like give some of those burnout kind of sensations and feelings and whatever. Someone could just be literally tired and fine, and like, you could just have so many different responses to the same stimulus across relatively similar trained individuals.
So instead of scaring people, let's actually talk about those responses and the positive things. I realized we're starting with the negative first and scaring people. No one's going to do a long run, but let's talk about the benefits. I had coaches in the past that say long runs, if done well, are the thing that put the tiger in the cat. And I've noticed that like when I start to do real long runs, during races, and I also do a lot of strides and speed work as well. But during races and during a lot of workouts, I feel like I still have stuff in the tank when I finish. Mm-hmm. It's like, okay, I've got this extra gear. And long runs, again, that's the physiologically you mentioned, it really helps build those deeper levels. It really helps get you that mileage, get you the aerobic, the physiologic benefits that really put a lot of power. Most running is inherently endurance. So you working on the one thing that really helps you is really going to give you a lot of that base and foundation for future work. It's one of the biggest benefits and something that most runners should be doing. What other benefits are there?
Yeah, I mean, I think you hit it pretty well. I think the other one, well, we could just talk physiologic first, and we just start there. I think that one's pretty obvious. If you go and you run a lot more, your body gets better at this thing called running.
Yep. More efficient.
You get more efficient. You can clear metabolites easier. You're from an aerobic cellular level, you get more efficient at turning over some of those byproducts and reuptaking some of those byproducts and using it again to create more energy. And that in itself is a skill on the inside of the cellular, biome there. So that is something that that's an adaptation. That is something that you train and you do, and it takes time. And you do it by spending a lot of hours doing aerobic work. And that comes from long runs. It can come from other sources too. It's not to say that that's exclusive, but building that can create better aerobic mechanisms, which indirectly can save off anaerobic mechanisms. And that's huge when you're talking marathon, half marathon, 10K, 5K, and even 1500. I think one of the other ones is resilience. You're out there for a long time. You're putting in a lot of hard work. If you can work hard for 2 hours, you can work hard for 15 minutes, when it's a race time. And I think that's part of also the psychological benefits that you can get when you go and you take it into the race. And also like in the marathon, right? Like, oh, I've been here. I've felt this, because you can also have workouts in long runs. A lot of people do it. And they'll have these long tempo runs and you're like, okay, I've been here before. Your body knows what to do. You don't freak out, or maybe you freak out a little bit because you're tired and it's the race that you've been training for. But at the same time, you can kind of fall back on that training and you're like, no, I can do this. I've been here before and we can get through this. And if you haven't had that stimulus in your body at some point before that, your body will freak out. It's going to send all of the signals telling you to stop. And so some of it is also training that nervous system as well, on the unconscious side of the brain. Like a lot of the mechanisms that go into firing your muscles, all those adaptations that we're talking about, like your nerves are also working as well this entire time. And they develop a sense of coordination, a sense of activation, endurance, and if they spaz out, you spaz out. And so the same thing goes for the muscle and the motor units. And there's this constant feedback loop between your brain telling your muscles what to do and them giving information back to your brain and your brain processing that to make more decisions for the rest of your body. And so the better that everyone can be in communication and build some of those connections, that will make your life a lot smoother and a lot easier. And so that is another massive thing that can come from long runs, and I think the other thing, if long runs are done well, whether it's workouts or easy long runs, it makes those easy days even easier. And that was another one of those things. I was listening. It's one of the East African athletes, and I feel so bad. I can't remember who it was, but they were talking about it. And one of their favorite things about those hard long runs that they do, when they start real easy and then they go and they run probably 30K at some absurd pace I can't comprehend. Then they get to go out and just go run 9-minute pace or something the next day. They appreciate those easy days so much more. They just oh, I can just go out. Everything just feels so easy after you've done these big amounts of volume and work. And as long as you're recovering from it, you can get this big stimulus that can create, adaptation and physiologic change and then keep building from it. And when you talk to a lot of the top athletes in whatever their relative sphere is, especially endurance sports, a lot of what they attribute success to is not getting injured. They can just stack together season after season after season of just building and building and building. And that can come from, maybe the long run distances stay similar, but then the stuff that's inside of it can change. And if you can build that resilience, build that tissue tolerance, you can start playing with variables a lot more. But you can't really play with variables if the one variable is the volume increase, because that's already such a drastic variable that you just got to make sure you can handle that first.
So speaking of handling it, so two questions for us and for you especially is, how do you define a long run? How long is a long run? And then how do you start picking up your mileage to create one if you don't currently have one and you decide it's worth adding?
Yeah, there's obviously, that's a great question. There's a huge subjective component to that, right? What's long for me might not be, a different definition for long than my neighbor, but a lot of people, they use kind of like the 20% of your weekly-ish mileage as one way that some people measure it. I kind of look at it as whatever you're comfortable doing, maybe like somewhere between 30 to 50% more. And so if let's say that's like, let's say you're comfortable running 6 miles, 50% of that's 9, right? Or no, wait, shoot, my math's off.
Yeah, no, that's it. Yeah, that's it.
No, wait, is it? No, it's not.
50,
wait. 6, 3, 9. Yes.
Doctor's running, not doctor's of math.
I'm also fresh off long run brain, guys. So give me some grace. I can't math.
That's an interesting way of putting it. I never thought about doing that. So like whatever my standard run is,
and 30% would be
50%. Huh.
And if that's 10, that's 15 at the top, and I can't math right now.
That's okay. So
you know what I mean?
Yeah, it's 15. Yeah.
Like, let's say if you put 50% on top of whatever you are truly comfortable running.
Right.
Like truly comfortable. I mean, you can go and run that any day of the week, come back and you feel good. You can go to work. You can have your day. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And I feel like that's true for most people. Obviously, once you get a little bit more trained, you can kind of throw that out the window. But that's kind of one way I look at it. And that's one way that you can kind of work on building things. And so like, if you can really only run 4 miles pretty comfortably, like your long run can be 6 and that's fine. Like that is a long run for you.
That's very true. That's a good way of putting that.
Yeah. Who am I to say that's not a long run? Like everyone's different and have their own adaptations, and maybe they don't have endurance running as their main sport. Maybe they are in the gym 3 times a week and they run twice a week.
That's fair.
And they're really only doing it for some level of adaptation or whatever they want to just keep their heart healthy.
I would say the other things that I might add, and some of these might be wrong, so I'm really curious to hear both your opinion, and for those of you in like leaving comments, let us know, because this is something I just kind of thought, was that when I was going through high school and college, kind of the general rules, you wanted to hit at least that 80 to 90 minute mark. Of if you were working for that long, supposedly there was something like physiologically that changed. Your body got a little bit better at using some different kind of materials, and you start to fatigue out some of your larger muscles. So some of the smaller intrinsic ones maybe get a little bit more time there. I don't necessarily know if this is true or not. I'm just realizing this as I think about this going, I never actually looked this up to see if there's any actual evidence behind this. But yeah, that was kind of a general rule. And that also takes the mileage out of going, all right, minimum 80 to 90 minutes for a lot of things. And then but that's also going to vary. If you're doing half marathon training or ultra training, your long run is going to actually be more focused on building over time, getting closer to whatever your goal race distance is. You can go by time, you can go by mileage. You just have to go whatever's comfortable and works for your body. And just, I think that I like that 50%, that 30 to 50% rule too. But I just don't know if there's any. This is the fun part about a lot of the running stuff. Is I don't know if there's research behind it. A lot of things is like people, somebody just
like
said
what is
it.
Long.
Yeah, somebody just said it, and that's the rule that everybody goes by. It's kind of like the 10% rule. Was it? Is it 10? Yeah, 10% mileage rule is that every week you're not supposed to increase your mileage by more than 10%. And somebody's like, well, if I'm running like 10 miles a week, I can only increase it by 1. Like, it depends, right?
It has limitations.
Yeah, it has. Everything has limitations. But so follow up to that, if you haven't done long runs, how do you pick up your mileage to do them? You have a general rule of thumb?
Yeah, and I mean that's kind of it. Yeah. If you haven't done it, is to basically take a look at what you are truly comfortable doing, and then kind of define, okay, what is long for you? And then you can kind of take a stab at it. And if it doesn't go your way, it doesn't go your way. Maybe it was a little too long. I mean, it's hard, right? Like where there's no clear cut line, I feel like if you take 30% off the top, I mean, 10 to 13, it seems pretty reasonable.
That's fair.
Or the 50 with the 6 to 9 or 4 to 6. That's not that unreasonable of a jump. And then you go back to your fours and you feel if you're good. And then you can kind of slowly build mileage over time, which we'll get to our next topic.
Yeah.
I did want to have one caveat though, like what you were saying. And I do agree with like the whole like 80+ minute type thing, but that's in trained individuals.
That's fair.
Those are individuals that do this a lot.
Right.
And are competitive in it. And in order to create an aerobic stimulus for someone that already runs 70 miles a week and is on the track multiple times a week and is racing, amongst high level competition, that stimulus looks very different. And you start asking different whys. And I think in order to truly create an aerobic stimulus, I mean, if you go run 10 miles at 7-minute pace, that's a 70-minute run.
Right.
So that's like, you're going to have to run over 80 minutes for it to be to have any kind of change on that stimulus.
Yeah, that's true.
Or 90 minutes. So there goes the light. We were talking about that before you came on.
I knew this was going to happen.
For the listeners who cannot see what's going on. So, I mean, Matt did say he's in a closet. He had a timer on the light that he didn't know the time was on. But the timer was going to end, so we weren't sure if this was going to happen mid-recording. But if you are a viewer, you can see
in the dark.
that he's in the dark, but you can still see him. I can see that high country little flannel there, and
it's like a throwback to when we had
and I can see your facial outlines.
It's a throwback to when we did the episode with Jeff Burns, where he was doing such a great job, and he kept talking, and I didn't move, and so the sun went down, and I hadn't turned any lights on. But back to so I think the picking up the mileage thing, I think one of the keys is understanding that you don't need to just jump suddenly and do a long run. That whatever your base run is, just start adding a little bit. Either add 5 to 10 minutes once a week, or add 1 or 2 miles once a week, and just see how you respond to that. Everything goes well, maybe go, okay, let me see maybe a teeny bit more, right? Let me add another mile on this. Let me add another 5 to 10 miles on this, but don't do it all at once. Take your time to go, let me build this. And certain people will build by 1 mile a week. Certain people will build by 5 or 10. And then after 3 or 4 weeks, like, take a break, either do the same thing or back down a little bit so your body has time to recover. But don't just go, oh, I do 6 miles a week. Now I'm just going to suddenly do 10 for my long. No, hold on. Like that, you might be like, yeah, I did it. But if you want your body to adapt, you got to make adjustments and let your body adapt to that and catch up. So I'd say make small adjustments, build up slowly, and let your body get used to it. And then eventually, before you know it, if you're running 6, you might be doing a 10-mile long run. You might be doing longer, but you just need to let yourself adapt.
Right. And it just comes, and it happens pretty quick. Like, it's weird. It's like when you start building these adaptations, like, yes, it does take a long time, but long time relative to a daily calendar. Like, you go and you have consistent workload over 2 months, you will have differences. You will have adaptations. Like, you will start to notice some of those things. And even something as simple as like a mile a day is 7 miles a week. So like if you go and you just kind of like gradually increase the tolerance of that, like before you know it, like you said, you'll be at 10 miles a day, and you'll do it feeling good. You won't do it feeling trashed.
Right.
And so it's like, I feel like if there's anything I've learned over all of the years of whether it's the science side of things and exercise physiology, the rehab side of things and physical therapy, the competitive side of things in running, it's like, don't rush it. Just play the long game.
Yeah. You gotta
play the long game. I mean, sure, you can rush it and do an okay race or a good but not great race, but then you're hurt again and you're going back into the cycle.
You have to start over again.
And you start over again. It's like, just do it the right way. Like, do it the long way. And like, it will show, like your time will come, and you just have to be patient. And that is honestly probably the hardest thing for most people, I think. And one of the reasons why we see so much injuries associated with long runs.
I'm going to add a piece on here and speed through it so we can get to the thing that people are waiting for, which is the shoe part. Is the whole like, do I do easy or hard workouts during long runs? And as David mentioned earlier, you got to get used to just the long run first before you make them fancy, right? So just get used to going out, and long runs typically during your base phase should, for most people, just be at whatever kind of similar pace, or maybe even a little bit slower to allow you to get to that mileage. And so I noticed some people are like, oh, I just can't run long. It's like, try backing off the pace a little bit. You're running a little too quick. So you might run the same pace or a little bit easier than what your normal runs are, just so you can get the mileage. Once you've gotten comfortable to a long run level, you're like, okay, this is what my goal was. only then, once you've adapted to it, can you start even considering doing harder workouts. And either can have, if you're doing a marathon, you can do the longer like marathon type workout where maybe like 10 miles or at your goal marathon pace, or maybe more, maybe less. Certain people I know love doing longer intervals during parts of long runs. Other people will do the fast finish where you maybe get, I need to stop hitting this table. Some people will
so
do
passionate about the topic.
Some people will get through, like, for example, if you're doing marathon training, you're doing 20 miles, maybe you get through 5 miles at your easy pace and the last 5 is at marathon pace. There's lots of different options. Whatever you do, you need to make sure that you're actually ready to do that, meaning you've got the base mileage for long run. And then it just needs to be something that you keep building upon that has the right stimulus for whatever your goal race is, right? It doesn't help doing things that aren't necessary and just overstimulate you or overtrain you. Make sure there's some degree of specificity to it if you're wanting that. If you decide, hey, I feel good and I want to do a workout, I'll go for it. But if you're training for something, make sure that the stimuli is appropriate, that you can recover from, and the more specific you get, the better the outcomes are likely to be. And David knows this better than me because you are the ones that actually do lots of long run type workouts. And I haven't done a ton of those since Regina kind of, got pregnant and moved away from doing a lot of the pro stuff. And now we just get a good mileage running unless she's feeling antsy and then takes off and I have to chase her while pushing a stroller at whatever pace she's decided to do for long periods. But yeah. So any thoughts on that before we move on to the shoe part?
No, I think that's great. Just make sure you're ready to do fancy stuff before you add any fancy stuff. I mean, like, there's not really any like right or wrong way of doing it.
There's no magic workout for sure.
Yeah. And they all create adaptations, and you want to create adaptations. You want to have some level of variability, because if you do the same thing every single time, then you won't adapt to it as much. You'll have diminishing returns.
All right.
So
totally agree. All right, so let's talk about the shoe question. So that we get to what shoes do you take for your long run?
Alphafly. I had to.
Only for trail runs, right? By the way, for people that asked about this, so I destroyed the Adios Adidas Adizero Pro Evo ones, and then I did shoe glue the outsole back on, and literally, and somebody on YouTube was like, we don't know the true test until David takes him on the trail. Literally the first run, he goes and runs on the trail, and my shoe glue job stayed on. Is that correct?
It stayed on. Did. If I had it here with me, I would show you. It's peeling a little bit on the underside, but it stayed on. I mean, I ran 35-minute road tempo at a decent pace, and the warm up was mostly trail, and the cool down, I mean, I went down a little section there. It wasn't like super technical, but it was a trail, and it was kind of like a I don't know, like maybe just a little bit wider than single track with kind of a relatively steep decline and kind of uneven footing into like a horse trail, like brittly section where it's really soft and like mulchy almost. Like kind of dropping down into that, and then to get back to our cars, kind of like a shortcut to get back down there sometimes after on the cool down, So I did that, and it survived. It did all right.
We need a podcast episode, shoes that are not supposed to be on trail that David has taken there anyway, and just
I felt so bad. I was like, they got, because it's like such a clean white on white. It's so dirty now. Like you gotta look at it. It looks. I mean, and that Lightstrike Pro blend that they do, it holds the dirt. Like it looks dirty. It looks so trashed. It's like it was one run that I took the thing in the dirt. To be fair,
both of us destroyed that poor shoe after one run. Like I got a couple runs in. I got a couple runs in it, but that first run is where the thing came off, and I was like, oh man.
But for those that did want the trail review or the mini review for that, the upper was surprisingly secure. I didn't feel, for it being a soft super shoe, because that foam is pretty soft, you know, and how light it is. I almost expected to be like really unstable when the second I stepped off of the road, but it actually wasn't too bad.
Yeah, it's a secure upper for how light it is, for sure.
Secure upper, outsole traction. I mean, it's definitely a road outsole. I mean, that thing's very, very flat, and that's not very grippy for dirt by any means. But but as far as the security goes, I actually felt like it went okay.
New Adidas, let's see if we get a trail version of the Pro Evo one. But so what shoes do you use for long runs, and what do you suggest?
Yeah, I mean, it depends on where you are, I think, in your stage of running. If you're just starting to do them, just do them in your daily trainers. You know, like if that is truly a novel stimulus and you just are like, hey, I know people do long runs. I've never really done it before and I kind of want to start improving my mileage. I kind of want to just go a little bit further. Stay in what you're used to because it's already a big jump in stimulus, like we said with some of the numbers earlier. And that's a lot more steps. It's a lot more dynamic load on your body. Like it is truly a bigger stimulus. So for that population, I say run in the shoe that you trust and that you know. Don't rock the boat too much. If you are in kind of the moderately trained population, you're used to some long runs. Maybe you do a couple half marathons a year. Maybe you do a marathon a year, you know, and so you're kind of used to some longer efforts. At that point, you could probably start playing around with some shoes that you feel a little bit more nimble in, but you still have some protection underfoot, maybe something a little bit lighter so that you don't fatigue quite as much in the later stages. Obviously, it's not a pure ratio of lighter and fatigue. I mean, that can be very different depending on the shoe design itself. But like some of those lighter performance trainers, you know, people really like for the long runs. So like your Adidas Bostons, I'm going to start blanking now after knowing a million shoes. But like your Endorphin Speeds, a lot of people really like those shoes for long runs.
I definitely love those for long runs.
Yeah. Or even like a Hoka Rincon, like a lightweight kind of nothing too fancy about it, but it's just a little bit lighter, but it still has some cushion on it and you can fatigue a little bit less. Some people just like their bread and butter, just like Clifton, you know, they just give me the cushion, you know, like go take your Triumph out there and just go hammer 20 miles or whatever. Like, some people just like that kind of a stimulus better and they don't really care about going a little bit lighter. But I feel like once you have a little bit more on you and a little bit more experience, you can kind of start working your way down. Some people are just beasts and can go run in a Kinvara or a Mach for hours on end. I don't know how, but or like the Mach X would be another example of a shoe that you could go do a lot of long runs in. On Cloud Monster. You know, Cloud Monster Hyper.
Now they're coming to you. The long run brain's starting to come off.
Yeah. I have long run brain. I ran in a shoe that absolutely no one's even going to know what it is today, so I don't even know if it's worth me saying this shoe.
Just say it.
The Anta G21 3 Pro Sean Fiber. That is the full name. I'm not kidding.
These names are getting
that is the full name on the tech sheet.
Yeah. So quick summary
Fiber,
here.
Fibre, not Fiber.
Yeah. So the quick summary is typically if you're getting into this stuff, you should wear whatever shoe you're used to wearing the most. So that's for most people going to be a daily trainer, right?
Yeah.
Your Saucony Ride or your Triumph or your Nimbus Cumulus, like whatever the normal thing that you're running in should be the shoe that you probably take for a long run. If you're running in kind of a lighter shoe and you just feel like after a long run you're a little more beat up, you might want to try something more cushion. So for example, if you like running in the Kinvara most of the time and then you're like, you know what, I just want a way more cushion shoe for this, a Triumph or a Ride might be a better option, but generally you want something that at least has a little bit of cushion and that you're really comfortable with because you're going to be in that shoe for a little bit.
Right.
The caveat comes when we're talking about marathon or half marathon race distances. And there's another thing you need to think about is if you're going to have a different shoe for your race day, if you're going to use the same shoe you train in, your daily trainer is going to be your race shoe for the half or full. Ignore what I'm about to say. But if you're someone like, I only use my Vaporfly or my Alphafly or my Endorphin Pro, whatever, then you need to, as your training progresses, start doing more of your long runs in that shoe. And the reason why is it's the specificity of training. I've said this a couple times in the rule specificity. If you want to know whether you can handle that shoe for marathon distance, the long run's going to be the most specific workout you can do to go, do I actually like this shoe the entire 10, 15, 20 plus miles, or do I only like it the first 2 miles? So do whatever your race shoe is going to be as you especially get closer to your race, your actual race. And for people that do hard workouts, a lot of people like using the super shoes during the longer runs. That can be really, really good. It is a lot of time in them. So just make sure that you're comfortable with them. But I find that's a really great time to go, can I handle this shoe for longer distances? And then you might decide, yes, I can. Or you might decide, no, when I get to that like 16 to 20 mark, I actually hate this shoe, and it'd probably be better for me to do my race in my trainer. And again, David said this earlier, the goal is to get to the start line and finish the race, not get to the start line and like not do great or what you're capable of. So I'd say that's my key thing on long run shoes.
Yeah, and I think there is a role for super shoes in long runs. I think the next tier of that would be the people that are experienced, that do compete at distances. And not to say that the other individuals do not compete. They compete. Like, it's not, I'm just talking more in a competitive scene where the times are starting to get a little bit faster. The variables that can determine placing and those types of things start just getting a little bit more teased out. And people just have a lot more lifetime miles on them and just a little bit more experience. But in those populations, if you are trying to run marathon pace, sometimes marathon pace can actually be pretty fast, even though it's a 26-mile race. And so some of those shoes can help you just run a little bit faster, take a little bit of the fatigue off your legs, and just kind of help you turn around and keep training a little bit easier. And so someone like me, I probably fall in that category. And like that would, it depends on what I'm doing in the long run, which basically dictates what shoe that I have on. Today, I'm just running time on feet. I'm just running easy. I'm just in a daily trainer. If I am anticipating it being kind of a moderate pace, but it's not quite marathon pace, like let's just say for me, somewhere 6 to 7 minute range, like in pace wise, I might put on a Boston or something like that. Something just a little bit lighter, it just feels a little bit nice. I can carry it rhythmic. But if we're getting down to marathon pace, I might put a super shoe on, especially for a long run type workout. And then, so there's caveats, I think. But yeah, if you're new to the sport, you're just barely starting to do it, just run in the shoe you're comfortable in, and then once you get comfortable with long runs and you've kind of been doing this for a little bit, you can start playing around with those shoes a little bit more, and you'll have a little bit more of an internal guide. And then, like you said, when you get to that next level tier there, when you're like, okay, now I want to use this shoe to drive performance, you got to make sure that you can perform with it and it can perform for you in a comfortable way. Because all of us have taken shoes out and it's felt good for 6 miles, but doesn't feel great at 11 or 12.
This is why, by the way, I love having a stroller, because if I have something I don't think I'm going to be comfortable with, I could take a second pair of shoes.
Oh my God.
Just in case. This is great. This is a shout out to being a stroller parent, and running with your little one, is that there's storage and you can also take extra stuff, food, water, extra shoe. Yeah, that has actually happened where I'm like, I can't keep doing this show. I got to switch out. So yeah, that is it. I'm going to try something. People, bear with me. What shoe should I throw to see if I can trigger the sensor so the light turns back on? What do you think?
Oh my God. What is, I got to be able to make out what's behind it. Is that a Fast R? What is that?
Yeah, that's, should I, this one right here? Or, the Fast R is right behind me. Which one?
Yeah, that is a Fast R heel. Wow. I know my shoes.
Yeah, that's good.
Which one do I throw? I forgot about that shoe. You have that colorway? That's a cool colorway.
It's a sweet colorway.
That is a very cool colorway.
I'm going to get some mileage back on this shoe again.
Fast forward?
The Fast forward. It kind of messed up my forefoot, but I'm going to try again because it forces you to be a little more hip dominant.
Yeah.
Maybe I'll throw this one.
Let's do the Fast forward.
I need to throw it because I actually need to take it with me back to California, so let's see what happens.
Yeah, I like the Fast forward mainly because if people, it worked.
It worked.
That if anyone didn't want to listen to that, they could just hit Fast forward. So that was why I wanted it.
Well, I'm going to empty this shoe wall by the end of the end of this episode, trying to keep the light on.
But that was good. Okay, yeah, perfect. It worked.
All right, so now moving on from shoes. So the final questions are: when you're doing a long run, what happens when there's an asterisk sign behind that? So 2 considerations: one, either environmental things, it's getting too hot or too cold, or you're returning from injury. And this might be 2 separate things, but it's both things like that you're going to have to think about modifying your long run. So what do you think about, because you are returning from injury, that's one thing. And we both have lived in Southern California where things can get, Santa Barbara is like perfect temperatures all the time. But right now where I was living in Monrovia and Alhambra, it easily gets 100 degrees really quick. By the time we wake up at like 5:30, it's already 70 plus. And then by the time we get ready, it's 80. So what considerations need to be made when you modify these things?
No, that's a great question. I mean, and I'm from the IE, so I know heat. Yeah,
that's fair. You know heat better than me.
I am no stranger to running 100-degree long runs. I joke all the time that Santa Barbara has just made me so soft. Like I've just become a baby over the last few years. Like I wouldn't bat an eye, man. It'd be like 95 to 100 degrees and I'd be like, that's fine. And I'll just go running it. And then like 105 was where I drew the line. That was where I was like, okay, no, that's hot. Like,
dude, Pomona, you know this too, because we both went to the same PT school at Western University of Health Sciences. It would be like 105 there, 110. You're like, should I run in this or should I not?
Yeah, at that point, it's like, okay, run in the morning. Don't let it get too hot.
Yeah.
Redlands gets hotter than that, though. I mean, we've had summers get upwards of even 115 sometimes.
My first experience in Pomona, by the way, coming from the Northwest, and like the first week I came down to Pomona, California, it was like 115 degrees, and I'd never experienced that before. And I was carrying some eggs back from the store, and I only seen this in cartoons, but I dropped one of the eggs and cracked on the sidewalk, and it really started cooking.
So did it really?
Cooked egg right there, and I was like, "This is not real." Did I make a mistake coming down here? Like, what's happened? Yeah, Southern California. Welcome. Summers are hot.
You know, I've never actually cracked an egg. I just kind of let Arizonans do that.
Yeah, but Southern California can do that too. Arizona for sure. But so environmental considerations and the return from injury considerations for the long run.
Yeah, so I think you have less considerations in the cold, most likely. But with heat considerations, you're going to sweat a crap ton more. I almost cursed on air. That would have been great.
Sorry, Nathan.
You're gonna sweat a lot more, and you're gonna work harder too. Like your cardiac drift is what they call like the workload of the heart and your heart rate, and things kind of gradually climb, even despite a similar workload across long periods of runs. That's normal, but in heat, that gets exaggerated a little bit more. And so some of those physiologic variables that we were talking about earlier, they get accentuated a little bit. And so your body on the inside is genuinely working harder, even if you don't exactly feel like it early on. So I think you're going to be losing a lot of sweat. You're going to be losing a lot of electrolytes. Your body's working a little bit harder. So I think with those long runs, especially if those long runs are starting to get over an hour, especially if they're getting upwards of 2 hours or more and you're in the heat, like you need to have some kind of a nutrition plan in place, whether it's fluids, electrolytes, glucose. You don't want to have heat stroke. You don't want to have a bonking episode in the middle of a freaking heat wave. You know, like that is bad news bears. So, and it can happen, and it can happen in trained individuals. I've seen it, and it's not pretty. And so you want to just make sure you want to be safe. You don't want to be sorry. So I think whether you're having like a naked belt with you, some kind of, a belt apparatus, or even just using pockets for gels, or have water fountains planned along the ways if there's some recreational parks or things that you know in your neighborhoods or towns or whatever. You want to have something in place that you know and you can trust and have it be relatively routine, so that if something happens or there's some level of help, but also you have a nutritional plan in place as well. And so like when I was living back in Redlands even before I got into longer distance stuff, even in high school, we would plan like if we had a long run, we'd plan it around the parks and we'd stop and we'd have drinks at the water fountains. That wasn't even anything coach implemented. That was just something we did. But it's just hot and you kind of have to, it's like, it's hot outside.
I think go for it. I think I'd encourage that in general, is that especially for heat considerations, even without heat, a lot of the sports dietitians I know and the American Academy of Sports Medicine generally suggests that if you start getting like not even heat related, you start getting over an hour of exercise, you should start thinking about bringing some fluids with you. You start getting up into that hour and a half ish area, you should start thinking about some kind of electrolyte drink. Because again, the goal, you're not doing this for weight loss. Hopefully you're doing it for performance. And if you want to maintain that performance, your body needs things. And after a little bit, your body's going to switch from just using carbohydrate or just using carbs. You're going to start running a little lower. So having fluids is really important. Maybe having some nutrition is important. So if you're a long run person doing it for marathon, you should be practicing whatever race day nutrition you plan to use. If you're just doing it in general, I'd say keep the fluids up, because I've found that if I don't do that stuff, I've got long run brain really bad the rest of the day. Your brain is one of the largest consumers of carbohydrate and fluids in your body.
Thank you. I was going to say that.
Yeah. If you don't use that, you're going to feel terrible later. And when you start adding heat in there, now it's dangerous because you're working so hard, and the primary way your body reduces its temperature is by sweating. And that only goes so far. So with your heat, make sure you have fluids or you have easy access to fluids. Make sure if it's really hot, you should really start thinking about electrolytes, because if you want to maintain your performance, it's really important. Something that I, being from Oregon, didn't understand until I got to Southern California. And then I was like, oh, this is a thing. And it took me many years to go, oh, I don't have to feel like crap during my long runs. I can feel much better if I just have a couple sips of fluid every 15 to 20 minutes. And I was like, oh, wish I'd listened.
Yeah. And I will say too, like, even like you had brought up the weight loss thing, not to go on a tangent at all, but like if there's any fear of taking in calories during a run, you can throw that out the window, because the caloric, you're going to be, no matter how many calories you put in during that run, you're going to be in a deficit.
Right.
I'd be very, very impressed if you did not come out in a deficit. You'd have to be eating the entire time.
And again, and for those of you who want more information on how this affects your bones, please go watch the episode with Rich Willie that I did, where he starts talking about, if you are really in a caloric deficit repeatedly, the first tissue that your body's going to start pulling stuff from to make up for that is going to be your bone tissue. And the worst word you can say to a runner is stress fracture. So if you want to avoid that, you don't have to eat an entire meal during your long run, but just getting a little bit of carbohydrate with fluid in there is a really good practice for maintaining longevity and performance.
Yeah.
Can I touch on cold weather running?
Oh, no. Yeah. I was going to start. Yeah, go for it then.
So, for those who don't, for any of the physical therapists out there listening, if you want to take the sports clinical specialist exam, you better know both cold considerations and heat considerations, because that may or may not show up on your sports exam. So cold considerations you need to realize is that when you're in the cold, your body is also working harder to maintain body temperature. You are inherently losing a lot of heat and things are going to drop really low. A really common thing when I grew up, I'd go for a run in 30-degree weather. I have a little bit of Raynaud's syndrome or phenomena, whatever you call it, where my hands and extremities just get really cold. So I might be running in a t-shirt, but I would always have gloves on because the extremities have much harder time staying warm. So because you are running in a situation where you are working a lot harder, you still need to think about two factors, and heat actually has the same concept. If it is really cold or if it is really hot, you are going to be utilizing more calories and you're going to be using a harder effort to keep yourself going. And that means you should not be afraid to modify your long run. If you had 15 planned, you're not going to be less of a person if you do 13. In fact, that actually might be a better idea to do 13, or even consider like splitting it up or doing some part of it somewhere else. That you just need to be ready to modify things, because don't get fixated on that timer number. The idea is a stimulus. And if the environment is too intense, you can have serious health consequences, which include death or extremity loss, if you push when things are too extreme. So if temperatures are getting over 100 degrees or getting below those freezing temperatures, if you're not used to that and you're not adapted to that, you should really consider modifying and doing things differently. For cold, you just got to make sure that you have enough clothes on, that you're able to stay warm enough. And because once your body temperature starts to drop, a really important thing for people that are like now starting to get hypothermia, once you start to get someone warm again, you can't let their temperature drop. There's some very serious things that can happen to both the cardiovascular system and elsewhere. So if you let your body drop, the body temperature drop really far, and then suddenly start to get warmer, you need to make sure you keep getting warmer. You can't be doing this stuff up and down. So whatever you're doing, be consistent and don't be afraid to shorten things up, because your body's working a lot harder than just 15 or just 13 or just 10. So environment can make it much harder.
Yeah. I couldn't have said it better myself. I think another thing that I hear anecdotally too is to be careful about over layering too.
Yeah.
And getting too warm and then sweating and then having a colder inner layer.
Yeah.
And then like
a little rebound there. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. But I think that also goes in hand with some of those physiologic swings that you're kind of talking about. So,
all right, let's
we won't go down a big rabbit hole on this, but a lot of the similar principles that we're talking about where you might have to modify things can also apply to really humid areas as well.
Definitely, for sure.
And combinations. I mean, if it's 95 and 100% humidity or something, I'm so glad I live where I live, but that is a realistic thing for a lot of people.
People on the East Coast in Florida, I don't know how you do this, Like, or anybody that's listening that's in like a really tropical area that gets really hot. You got that heat and humidity. I don't know how you do that.
Like, bro, that's so hard.
I gotta take a drink of water right now.
Yeah. So a lot of the same similar ideas, principles.
Yep.
We don't need to go into it.
Yeah. So last thing, and this is a personal thing because you're just coming off injury. How do you return or modify your long runs coming off of injuries?
Yeah, it's a great question. I just don't do them for a while.
Got it.
Honestly, I mean, that's like, I mean, I've been up and down with injuries pretty much my entire running career. And I actually had a pretty good stretch there. I went almost like 2-ish years without having one that like took me out. And that's really good for me. And then I finally had that one at the end of track season there that like really got me. And I was like, fudge, like that's not good. So I'm coming off of it. I mean, really, that was probably my first real long run since the injury. I mean, I don't think I've run more than 10, 11 miles.
And you did 12 this morning, right?
I did 15-ish.
15.
It was like 14.7 or something. It was like an hour and 50 minutes. Then whatever the math. I think it was just shy of 15.
Got it.
And then I did have one workout where I got up to 12. But that's, warm up, drills, strides, there's a break there, and then, work out and then cool down back to the car. That was in the Evo once the other day. So like my workout days and my long run days tend to be a little bit more, and then I go shorter on my other days. I don't go quite as far. I'll probably do maybe 6 tomorrow. But I just try to take my time. I just try to feel comfortable and feel good about it, especially given the history that I have. And I'm not going to lie. Sometimes there's things that play with you on the little sides of your heads. Like, am I feeling that? Is that a bad thing to feel? Like, it's so easy to get caught up in that stuff. And I've come back enough times. I don't panic, like a lot of people do. And you just try to keep a good headspace about it. Being a PT, I'm not immune to injury. I have a human body and I need to take care of it. And I try to, but sometimes things get in the way, but, I just try not to do it for a while, resist the temptation. Every once in a while, it gets the best of me. That's a lie. I did one 16-mile run a few weeks ago, and I wasn't on my like coach's like scheduling thing. Usually when we're coming back from injury, it's like, just get healthy, and get some consistency back. Once you have the consistency back, then we can start doing stuff. Yep. And I went on 16 and I immediately got a not so happy text. So
let's do as your coach suggests. It suggests that typically long runs, like we said, they're a very big stimulus. If you're coming off of injury, just get healthy first. Get used to the normal mileage before you start doing your longer runs. And then, like anything, right, slowly build those back in. You do not need to jump all. And David has years of experience running 15, 16, 20. So that's a fairly standard thing. I probably would have suggested maybe, you did a 12. Okay, that makes sense. But just like, easing things back, because your body, again, especially when a tissue is fresh, when we talk about injury, it means that when things are healing, that tissue is fresh. That's not necessarily the same tissue that knew the 15-mile run. There's going to be a piece of that that's new, that's never done that before. And so you need to give it some time to just adapt back. And that might mean taking some time. And I think that's the big kind of takeaway with the long run, this long run episode, is that long runs do take time to really master. And like everything's just ease into these things, right? Ease into the crazy workouts that all of a sudden I'm seeing a lot of these pop up on Instagram. Oh, you have to do this long run type workouts. Like, not yet if you're not ready for it. You have to do this distance before the marathon. There's such variety in what people need, right? You have to do this distance if you're this runner. No, you just need to find, like, it's good. It's a good stimulus if your body can handle it, that once a week, maybe think about doing a little longer effort and just kind of build in some of that stuff when maybe you have time. A lot of us, weekends very common for that because we just sometimes have more time. But take your time and figure out what works for you. Some people might use their normal trainers. Some people might use super shoes that are trying to get used to them for the race. Some people might do super long runs. Some people might not be able to do that if it's 110 degrees outside and you need to modify it. So just know the basics and make them work for you is kind of the key that I think we want you to take from this. Any other closing thoughts on this?
Yeah, and I think one other one is just be honest with yourself where you are at this given point in time, not where you want to be, not where you were last year. Like, where are you right now? Be honest with yourself and build from there, and don't fall into the comparison trap of like, oh, so and so is doing this. Or everyone says, like, if you want to be a good marathoner, you got to be running 100-mile weeks. That's not the case. There's plenty of good marathoners that don't, but it's just like there's certain like things that fall into the endurance sport world for whatever reason, whether it's running or cycling or whatever, like where there's this, like you said, you have to do this, you have to do this. Everyone's all about this right now. Like, you got to go do this. And it's like, I don't know if you do. I think consistent work and hard work wins most of the time, like
your body really doesn't know the difference between a lot of different stimulus you throw at it. It just knows that it is a stimulus. And the more specific you get with it, that might be better. But the nuance of, you have to do this exact type work. You got to figure out what works for you and creates that benefit. And so that takes some experimentation and some patience to figure out, how did I respond? What is going on here is kind of the big thing behind this. So yeah. For those of us, hope we always, as we finish this up, always hope this stuff is helpful. We do this because we really enjoy this. As I said, I'm doing this from now. It feels like a heated closet because the air conditioning is not reaching in here. But we do this every week. Really appreciate you watching. We have a variety of platforms that we do this on, be it on YouTube, be it on iTunes. There's a lot of different places you can find this. There's the video. The audio obviously comes out before the video. So typically the audio is released on Wednesday and the video is released on Sunday. Did I get that right? Right?
Audio Wednesday, video Sunday. I believe so, yeah.
Yeah, I think so. Bach and BJ, don't get mad at me. I said that wrong. There are also lots of places you can always find us in terms on our social media sites, be it LinkedIn, be it Instagram, Facebook, all those places. And of course, the biggest and the main place that you'll find us is our website, where we talk about the art and the science, the things we put on our feet, especially shoe reviews and a variety of things that are out there. As always, it would really help us if you could hit the like or subscribe button. It does help support some of the things that we do here, because this is all stuff we do on the side. This is not our primary source of income. We all have jobs that we do, and we do this because we really enjoyed it and want to share information from you so you can be happier and healthier with your footwear and your running choices. Appreciate your time. Hope everyone has a great day, and we're going to sign off now.